Welcome to our Biz Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Cuthbert, Creative Director at Baker Creative. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. This is exciting. It's different. It's different for me. It's out of my comfort zone. I've done a few podcasts, but they're all each different.
Understood. So, tell us about your background and education and guidance counseling and how that assisted you in the political area.
Well, I went to a Parsons College in Fairfield, Iowa, and I have a degree in sociology, secondary education, and a minor in psych. And I have a master's in guidance and counseling. And those degrees all together really have helped me in the political arena because it's taught me how to understand people, understand organizations and social groupings as they move about. But most of all, it teaches about understanding people, and you really got to understand people to navigate through the political arena. But not only political arena, any arena that has people in it, from teaching school to being in the corporate world, you got to understand people on how to make things work. Because when you don't, it's hard to be successful.
Absolutely. So what really got your attention about politics to begin with?
Well, I grew up. My grandfather was very active in politics. He ran for office. And at the time that he ran, they poured acid in front of our homes. And then they painted the picture as a black hand going over the city and tried to paint him as a communist. So he started an organization called the Democratic Voters League to get African Americans engaged in politics here in Dayton, Ohio. And from that, my father was able to benefit from opportunity came right when they decided to have minority majority districts. And my father was elected in 1966. So my grandfather got to live to see my daddy get elected to office. But at the end of the day, he had built the foundation for my father to be able to be a successful political person. And you got to realize that during that time, morticians, and that's what I came from, a family of morticians that started in 1932, that was really a focal point in a community for services. I mean, we helped people get their birth certificates, we notarized papers, we read papers. Not only were you a funeral home, but you were the center of information. So you were able to develop a good base from that.
That's really fascinating.
But I wasn't interested in politics. Let me just make that clear. I was not interested in politics. I mean, we lived at the funeral home. My first job was carrying flowers at a funeral. All I had to do is come downstairs and help out. So I assisted my father. I ran the business while my dad did politics. And I was like, oh, I want no parts of this, none. And plus, it was during an era where, girls were seen as girls. You got married, you had kids, and you went on about your business. So I ended up being like his daughter's son.
Yep.
And so after he got sick, and he had spent 22 years, very successful. In fact, he was one of the founders of the Black elected officials of Ohio, which is the oldest Black organization in the states for state legislators. And from that came the Congressional Black Caucus. He was very, very, has such foresight and vision. And when he was dying from prostate cancer, he said, well, I want you to take my place. And I'm like, I didn't even really know my daddy recognized I was around other than working. I was shocked. And of course, a lot of people were shocked. um, that, but in Ohio, if a person recommends their replacement, the party signs off on it, and the speaker or the minority leader of the party that that person is signs off on it, you get appointed. And then I had to run for election. And in fact, one of the things that was so interesting is that it's normal when a mortician dies that the other morticians come in and do the services. But my family couldn't agree on another funeral home. So I ended up directing my own father's funeral.
That's really hard.
Yeah. But because I was a girl, you got to show that you're tough and you can handle all of these things. And so that gave me some, what you would call credibility, that I was tough. And when I became a state rep, the main thing was I had to run to prove that my dad didn't make a mistake. That's really why I ran. And then once I got there, I realized, oh, they need people like me. These folks take themselves too serious. They don't see themselves as the constituency that they represent.
Mm-hmm. So he obviously really saw a lot in you. And I mean, between his experience being in there, they need more people like you. And then your commitment to kind of extending what he did with your own take on it. I think that's really touching. I mean, I think that's really sweet.
And the good things that he did. I mean, I took on the Correctional Institutional Inspection Committee. My father had started that. I took that on and with a passion, because he really believed in making sure that only prisoners were treated with respect, as well as the folks who worked in there. I also kept constituent days, which were what my dad did, that once a month people could come and see you and tell you what your problems were, and you would try to help them. But the one thing that he always emphasized was that, are you a registered voter? And do you vote? So, he single-handedly got a lot of people registered to vote, and we try to continue that commitment. So, and in politics, the office, people make the office don't make you. And once you allow the office to make you, then you kind of lose sight of why you're there.
I think that's happened a lot, and we've all seen what comes from that, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not good because everyone has their own agenda, and then you're like, what about the people that put you there? What's going on?
I mean, really, we've reached a point now, which is sad to say, is that if the people happen to get help, it's by accident. It's not an intent. And I don't come from that environment. I came in that environment, whether you're Republican or Democrat. We know once the election was over, it was over, and went to work to help the people.
Absolutely. So what was it like to be the first Black woman to serve in the Ohio Senate when you were elected?
Ooh. First of all, I'm going to be honest, I just give all glory to God, because that district, if you look at the district, for a Black woman to have won it, it was like, I don't think so. But we did. We won. And it was so humbling to be the first. And I want to clarify, people who are trailblazers, they never really get to enjoy the trip. They're constantly on the journey. The satisfaction of seeing that other Black females that came behind me in the Senate lets me know that what I went through was not in vain. And then I went on to become the minority whip and the first female to become a minority leader in the state Senate. And that was interesting, that my colleagues wanted me to lead them. And I found that to be extremely challenging. But one of the things that I did, and that's about leadership, and I truly believe in caboose leadership. And leadership means, by that, I'm going to lead from the back so I can see everybody in the front. I'm going to give people credit for doing things that they. So, because if you do that, if you're in the front, sometimes you turn around, you're nobody back there. I'd rather lead from the back and make sure everybody is being pushed forward. And one of the things that I did was I named all my senators in the Democratic Party. They were named after Pooh Bear characters. And then there were a couple, because I had a few more than the Pooh Bear characters. I had Scooby Doo and a couple of more. And then I had them in chairs. People take themselves too seriously. And I had them sitting in chairs. And if a senator walked in and saw that his particular character was in the corner, he knew he was in trouble. I didn't have to say anything. They knew it. And it was fun. They knew who they were. They knew if they were a Tigger. They knew if they were Robin. They knew if they were a Piglet. And I mean, I had fun doing it. And it was to stop taking yourself so serious and see yourself as a constituent, that we've been given a special gift to be in office. Mm-hmm. And so we owe a duty and a responsibility for the people to know that we care about them. We're not supposed to be puffer fish.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So I'm sure there's been a lot of changes, in the Senate since you've been there. What do you see that kind of is like, whoa,
First off, the serious reduction of women.
Mm-hmm.
When I became senator, Democrats had like 3 women, and the Republicans had like 4 or 5. And I don't know if the Republicans have any women now or not. I don't watch that group that closely, but I know that we had enough people. It was very important to maintain enough to be valuable to the Senate. And that meant we maintained a number where you couldn't pass an emergency without us. So there had to be a compromise. Well, that is not the case now. Democrats, and because of gerrymandering, have lost so many seats in the Senate. Mm. So, and one thing that we do know, absolute power brings absolute corruption, and that the state of Ohio now is one party, and you need 2 parties to be able to compromise and do good government.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So then, when you look back, I mean, I'm working on the Trailblazing Women for Ohio Politics project with Bowling Green, and you're highlighted in that. But there is some research that, I'm working on the page that has like comments of a lot of these trailblazers that had to overcome from other folks is quite surprising, Can you kind of shed some light so maybe some of our audiences are not familiar with, some of the pushback you got, being in office?
Well, one of the things is that, especially for women, how you look determines if somebody is going to listen to you. So whereas the gentlemen, they can wear the same suit, same tie, same underwear and socks. Nobody knows, nobody cares, as long as they don't smell them. And so, but for women, you got to have a certain look, not only for other women, but for the men to even think that she's somebody I might need to listen to. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother issue that women have to go through that men don't even have to think about. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's the hurdle is raising money. Because I have been there where a PAC group would give, was 5 of us when I was in the House, and they would give all the guys $500. They give me $250. So, as women, we learn how to do more with less. The other thing is that women aren't as apt to help other women in the political arena when I was coming along. Whereas with my dad, all the women were there to help him make phone calls, do this, do that. When I got there, it's like, whoa, where did it go? Mm-hmm. And you had the men who stepped up, whose skills were somewhat limited on what you really needed. But they had good faith effort. That's another hurdle. The other thing is that when it came down to getting respect from your colleagues on legislation. And one of the things that was so apparent with Helen Rankin talking how she had already, before I got there, she had already been pushing for this mammogram. And it's that nobody saw it serious. Well, I mean, when I was in the House, there was a doctor here that had really messed up some women's private parts and we tried to do less legislation to try to alter that happening in the future. And I mean, you could see some of the legislators were sitting up there asleep while these women were giving heartfelt testimony. I remember introducing legislation about being able to breastfeed in public places in discreet ways. I mean, the men just didn't want to hear it. I mean, to the point that I had to tell them, look here, how do you think Eve fed Cain and Abel? I mean, that kind of stuff, it was, I mean, just the obvious. They only thought that we were interested in daycare and stuff like that. Well, I was a businesswoman. I was interested in what was happening in business. And because my district had agriculture, I served on the agriculture committee because, that's what women do. They embrace whatever they've been chosen to do. And I mean, I was out there visiting farms and climbing up silos and understanding about dairy farming and all of that. And because I cared for my constituents. We don't see that anymore. Just people just take it for granted. Well, of course, with the term limits, whether I'm there or not, before I learn who's there, they're gone.
True.
Yeah, or either they're going back and forth. And that was not the intent. The intent was to come and serve the people and then go on, because your term limits were really by the voters.
Yeah.
And I know having, when I got there, having that experience from other legislators to help you say, oh yeah, you come up with this great idea, and they'll say, well, no, we tried this at such a time. It did not work out. But if I wanted to try it again, this is the way that I would go about it. I mean, people being helpful. But you don't see that we've gotten party divided, which is not good for the people.
And I think a lot of people are very frustrated by that, right? All the fighting, and they don't want to see it. They just get it done. I mean, why are we wasting so much time talking about, just forget it, move on, get it done.
One of the things for sure, good government is good politics. And people don't care whether you like each other or not. They just want you to do what's best in their best interest. They don't care whether you don't like so-and-so. Just do what's right for us as the people. That's what we put you there for.
Right.
And along the line, we've lost sight of that. And, even when we talk about the documentary, that was one of the things that was so clear throughout the documentary, is that most of us backed into politics, or somebody just happened to say, well, we'll just grab her and she can do it. And it's not that we said, I think I want to do this. It's because women are so practical. At the end of the day, they're very practical. I mean, I've seen guys that just say, how's your campaign going? Just great. And they lose by 70%, but to hear them tell it, everything was just great. Whereas, a woman is going to say, she got to worry about her family, about her kids, about her job, about all these kind of things. And, she's taking all these things in consideration before she steps out there. Whereas a lot of times the guys just step on out there.
Right. I agree. So, I mean, do you think all that, dynamic and climate turns a lot of women off from trying to be in politics today?
I think we got a new breed coming along. And the new breed, and one of the things that I've seen that I've watched grow is the fact that women are playing sports. And that is I was a cheerleader. And cheerleaders, dancing and all of that, those are really individual in a group setting. Whereas little boys start with t-ball and all this stuff, or they learn to work as a team. Teamwork. They learned how to win, how to lose, and just how to come together and just move on. And I think we don't want to look at it, but it is a team sport. Politics is a team sport. And that is where they have really had the advantage. But these younger girls are playing soccer, they're playing volleyball, they're playing basketball, they're playing sports. So they are getting that same concept of teamwork, of how to work together, how to win, how to lose, how to have that camaraderie. So with these younger women that you see coming along, they're not going to take the crap that we took. You know, that the Betty Montgomerys, the Joanne Davisons, the Helen Rankins, the Rhine Mc Clins, they're not going to take that we've had to take to try to succeed.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard on some of these guys to be able to work through that because they're just not going to back down.
So in serving as the secretary of ASDC, how does Ohio's political climate compare to the rest of the country?
Well, when I was secretary of the Association of State Democratic Chairs, I'm no longer that because I'm no longer the vice chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, where I was the longest serving vice chair of the Ohio Democratic Party. And twice I served for minimum a small time as the chair of the state party. Ohio has to rebuild itself from the ground up. And gerrymandering hasn't helped us. And one of the things that's really important, your local parties are going to have to become stronger. And where they also are going to have to focus in on school board races, they got to build a bench. And that's what you really see missing in the Democratic Party in Ohio, is that our bench is not as strong as our Republican colleagues. And we got to start with the school boards, the township trustees, local government, mayors, county, and move up that way, because they have a strength. I mean, right now with the Republican Party, they're going to be fighting at the end of DeWine's term on who's going to run for governor. I mean, they just got them all lined up, and the Democrats probably aren't sure who's going to do it. You got the Secretary of State, you got the Attorney General. Well, of course, you got all the statewide offices. So they're going to be jockeying for new, different positions.
Yeah, I understand. So how does teaching at Central State University give you hope for the future generations?
You know, teaching on the college level is very intriguing, and because you get to hear young minds think about how they see the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I always learn from them as they learn from me. And one of the things I always tell them, I'm a primitive modern woman. I'm probably going to say a cliche or something that you've never heard of and don't understand. And you're going to say something that I've never heard and I won't understand. So I'll ask you, and you can do the same with me. And one of the fascinating stories I always talk about is that one time we were talking about having children without the difference in my age group, where it was a shame to have a child without getting married. I mean, literally, there were shotgun weddings. And if you did that, you know, your parents might tell you, if you didn't want to go to Chicago, you shouldn't have got on that train. Well, we knew what that meant in my day. And one of the kids said to me, well, why Chicago?
Oh, no.
So here I am trying to explain that was a figure of speech about if you hadn't had sex,
right,
you would have gotten pregnant. And so therefore it was associated with getting on a train, going to a city, and the city was Chicago. So,
you're like, uh-oh. I had the same thing happen to me. I was like on an odd call with a IT person, and I was like, oh, I think there's something strange in Denmark. And he's like, what's happened in Denmark? And I'm like, okay, forget it.
and it's so interesting because the cliches that we use, you know, I can recall when I was mayor, And I used the term, something had happened. I was like, oh, Scotty beam me up. And well, I didn't know that that was a drug term for being extremely high.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, hey, you learned something new, right?
Yeah, that's why I say I'm a primitive modern woman, because what's old is new and what's new is old, and everything in between I'm trying to figure out.
I understand. So, with all the vast background that you have, what do you think the biggest mistake you see other business women make in the market?
I think that one of the is that women sometimes who ascribe to jobs within a masculine field try and in some instances lose their femininity and develop on a masculinity. I think it's important that at all times you should display your femininity and let it be known that yes, I'm a woman, yes, I'm smart, yes, I am awesome, and I don't have to try to pretend to be a man for you to see all of that in me.
Right, to see the value. I've had
Yes.
that when I first started my business. It was like you got to dress like a guy, and you have to have pantsuit, and you can't have go walking with it. And it's like, what is happening? But there is a definite, thought process behind that.
Oh, I mean, we can go back until when Hillary Clinton ran.
Mhm.
They talked about her in the pantsuits. They talked about her. I remember she had some little top out like yours. That the one that you have on, they kept talking about the cleavage. And I'm like, Hillary Clinton got cleavage? Okay. They were so focused in on what she wore.
They
And
were.
they really were. And so one of these things that we as women battle is perception. And perception is reality.
And I also think the other challenges are people being shaped by that perception. It's someone else's story, it's someone else's narrative, not your own.
You
And
have to get yours out there. One of the things that I used to do, especially when I was mayor, is that I would be so self-effacing that it really was nothing left for you to say about me. Because I would have just talked about myself so badly to the point that you would turn around and say, "You're not that bad."
Mhm.
But as mayor, being the first female mayor of the city of Dayton, I wore hats. I wore hats, and I because I never want at one time for anybody to think that I was other than a female and that I embrace being feminine.
Mhm.
And that was one way of showing it. Um, the other thing was, I mean, I've always had eclectic kind of glasses. I had circle square glasses, because listen, they're going to talk about you anyway. So you might as well help them with the narrative.
Well, I do think it's endearing that the feedback you get, like you ride the bus and you just, feel like the people's mayor. I mean, you feel very approachable and that people can connect with you. Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Sure. When I was mayor, I did a lot of walking. In fact, it was always people, I still walk a lot. I call it the urban gym. But when I was mayor, I walked a lot, and people really didn't think I even had a car or could drive. But I would get on the bus and I would ride the bus, and then somebody would realize, is that her? Oh, what? Yes. And then you find us riding on the bus, taking pictures, and then I have to go and say, pull my little cord and get off the bus. I was the people's mayor. I did mayor's walks in the city, which were started actually by a former mayor, Clay Dixon, that I just took him to another level. And I walked the neighborhoods and see what needed to be done. And I would bring the city people with me. And then the people get to walk with you. The kids could walk with you. And I was just out there in the city. And at the end of the day, it only hurts when you care.
Mm.
It really does. Because you see the people that really are depending upon you to do the right thing. I remember there was an opportunity where a tax came about, and I couldn't support it because I saw myself as a constituent. I couldn't afford it. And I knew if I couldn't afford it, the rest of my constituents couldn't afford it. And, I caught a lot of pushback on that, and I give you another example. To this day, I don't have a television. And the reason why is when they changed over to having these little boxes and stuff. Well, for people who are in the lower socioeconomic, television was their entertainment. Now they have to pay for that if they really want to see something, because them boxes didn't work. And so what happened was, now you got cable, you got all of this. So now these folks are paying for something that they really had not budgeted for their still home entertainment. And I started off without protesting about not having a television for that reason. And then it just went on and became a habit. And I really like it. I tell people all the time, because I don't have a television, I think I got a better attitude than most people who watch television.
Right, a lot less stress.
Yeah, it's different reading it when you read it versus when you see all the dramaticness with it and they keep saying the same thing over and over until the next story breaks. I like it the way it is.
Oh, absolutely. And then you read it, you get more detail too.
You get more detail, and then you generally got more different places to go to get information and come up with a conclusion. I used to tell students at Central State that we're going to do scuba diving thinking. We're not going to do snorkeling thinking. We're doing scuba diving thinking. We're going to dig deep.
I love that. I think that is awesome, because, people are looking at Twitter and 140 characters and that's the whole story. No, it's not the whole story. It's just it's like an order.
It's just a snippet.
So out of all the things you've done, what are you most proud of? Because you've done a lot.
I don't know. I'm proud of the Korean war veterans that I got here in the city of Dayton. I'm proud of that. But more importantly is the people that I've touched to help make their lives different. I think that's more so a legacy than a building or anything like that. And I really appreciate that from learning from my father, that my dad's been gone since 1988, but sometimes people talk about him in such a way, I'm thinking, he's going to call me any day now. And it's not about what he wore. It's not about what he drove. It's not about where he lived, but it was what he did to help and how he made people feel. And that has been really what I consider my legacy, is to try to be there for people to help. Like some of the things I do is there's a little house in front of a church that would have been a food where you put a free book place. But for that neighborhood, they need food. So twice a week, I put food in it. And I have a couple other angels that help me with that. But it's doing those kind of things. And at the end of the day, if I can tell you everybody I helped, then you haven't helped enough. I don't know who all I have helped, but those that I have helped, they know it.
Well, and you also go into the schools and you also teach.
Oh my God. I serve in the schools, and you talk about that's the Lord's work, especially in the inner city schools. And it's just not Dayton, it's all over the country that we have allowed. And I say, some people don't want to hear it, but I want to say baby boomers were the beginning of starting where we are with these selfish children. And that we wanted to make their lives so much better than what they had. But we gave them things, but we didn't give them ourselves. And so, and that's what's missing. And you can feel it and you can tell it. And these children they really want structure, but they don't know what it is.
It's so true. I'm big believer of that. They want it, and they don't know what to expect next without it.
And technology has just destroyed their thinking ability and their ability, because they made their lives instantaneous. So one of the big issues you have with young people nowadays is patience.
Mm-hmm. True.
Because they think everything should happen right now. But then you have the younger people who are interested in the environment and some other things, but still the key here is patience. And the other thing that I have noticed among a lot of the children is emotions. They do not know how to express
Mm-hmm.
through emotions.
The self-regulation, and then
Yes.
COVID didn't help either with the isolation.
No, and I think that even though technology on teaching, most kids probably benefit from hands-on teaching,
Mm-hmm.
where there's that teacher-student interaction, whereas I don't think the computer telling you good job, and the kid is saying, this is my third time trying. What do you mean good job? Because it's so automatic. And I think that has really hurt them in their educational pursuits.
So what would you say to people, younger people interested in going into politics?
The first thing I would tell them is that go in, number one, you got to go in it for the right reasons. And the right reasons, you got to care and you got to have a passion, because the crap that you're going to take after during that, you got to keep focused. And being spiritual has been really beneficial to me, because if you're a true leader, you're going to be isolated. I don't like to use the term alone, but you're going to be isolated. Number two, you better make sure that you're financially secure. You got to be financially secure, because you're not going to make money in politics. And if you do make money in politics, you're probably going to jail.
Yeah.
And number three, you got to have a base. You need to have a base of at least 10 people that you know of that will be willing to give you $100 without even questioning just the fact that you're going to do something. But you need to have a base to spring from, whether it's teachers, whether it was funeral directors and families, whether it was daycare operators, wherever you come from, you need to have a base of people, or even your neighborhood or some other activist. You need to have a built-in base to springboard into politics. And at all times, you should never forget about registering the vote and getting people out to vote. And that once you are elected, never forget how you got there.
So with all the experience that you have, what was the biggest takeaway from the political stuff you've done?
Ooh, people are mean. People can really be mean, and people can lie and talk about you and don't even know you, and building that shell so you don't become bitter, so you can keep doing what you need to do. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways, was learning how to cover yourself and not lose yourself in doing what you had to do for the people.
But how can people do that today? Because there's so many messages and everybody's telling you how you should be, like we talked about. How does someone isolate themselves so they don't get sucked into that?
I think that the key is you got to have self-confidence and be authentic. And I always talk about the one thing I'll tell any advice to any candidate: do you. That eliminates a whole lot of things. I mean, there's certain things you got to do as running for office. I mean, I think the hardest job running for office for me was you had to have your hair one way so people could identify you. I mean, it's the hardest job because I always want to change it around, but that was a hard job. But it's a means to an end. And so you recognize those kind of things and you do them. I recommend young people to really, you got to have it regardless. You got to be authentic. You just got to do you. It's the easiest way to, because people can really, I'm going to use this as a Donald Trump. You take a Donald Trump, you go back in all of Donald's history. He's been that way. He's been authentic. Like it or not, the man has been authentic. Okay. And so the people that follow him see his authenticity. They know what they're getting. And so whether you like it or not, I'm not saying whether we like it or not, I'm just giving an example of authenticity that really it hasn't changed.
So it's almost a unique selling proposition is the fact that he's authentic and true to himself, no matter what the situation seems to be. So
Correct.
people are like, it's better to know where we stand versus with some other folks, you don't ever know where they're standing because they're all over the place.
And I think that was a prime example between the Gore and the Bush race.
Mm-hmm.
Bush stayed himself all through the debates. But each time there was a debate, Gore was listening to his handlers, and he was a different Gore at each debate. I think at the end of the day, when people compared the two, they said, well, at least we know what we're getting over here.
True. That's
and
true.
So it's very important to have authenticity. Just do you, be you. You know, most of the people who have known me all my life, they'll say, that's who she is. She just happened to have been a state rep. She just happened to have been a state senator. But that's still her. You know, I have a friend that owns a drive-through, and every once in a while I'll go and work there at the drive-through just to be with the people, you know, and they're going like, is that really her? Yeah, really? Hey, and they just be tipping me.
Hilarious. But you know what I did notice though, is that you're really your story is really about resilience and having the passion for the people that you serve. And I think, you know, that people really gravitate towards that, right? I mean, you are you, and there's nothing wrong with that. You were built the way you should be because you had an assignment, right?
And I think, you know, even to this day, every day I wake up, I said, well, if God woke me up, then he's not done with me. So I have purpose. And that's what we should always be about. And you know, I really believe in what Shirley Chisholm said, because sometimes she's one of my sheroes, that can you imagine out of 435 Congress people in the House, and you're the only Black woman there, and what she probably went through. And so whenever I think that I've been through something or going through something, I look at her, I look at Harriet Tubman, I look at Maya, I look at, you know, even the Oprahs and all of them, they've all gone through something to get there. You know, we just didn't arrive. And so building up on that makes us stronger. Absolutely. And I think every woman out there who has achieved anything has a story to tell.
Understood. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I think you had some wonderful insights, and I know a lot of people will learn a lot.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe so you can get notified when new content comes out. Please share this with anyone who could be inspired by it, and feel free to post any questions so we can be inspired by new content. Thanks for listening. If you're interested in learning more, visit our website at bakercreative.co.